Hello and welcome to a brand new day of free-to-play here on Magic the Gathering Arena. Get the dish on the latest with me, Lord Rumfish. I am doing my limited set review for March of the Machine. This is where I'm going to focus in on the commons and uncommons. This is the official Magic site. We will look down at the double face cards after we've gone through the main part of black, because there's a few more black cards hiding down there. And this is just to kind of familiarize everyone out there with the key cards, the backbone of the limited format that you're going to see, and just some thoughts that I have on it. I'm not going to give number ratings on the cards yet. I think it's a little too early. And I think that a lot of people are going to have trouble getting a good handle on this format. So I'm not comfortable putting numbers on the cards quite yet. Once I jump in and do a couple of drafts, I might revisit this, go over the rares and everything, and do like a full video series again. But for now, let's just get in here. Bladed Battle Fan. So this is a piece of equipment. Black and colorless, common. It has flash. When it ETBs, you attach it to a creature you control. It gains indestructible until end of turn. And the equipped creature gets +1/+0. It also equips for 1 colorless, which is very cheap. So I kind of like the equipment that I'm seeing in this set. I think it's a useful combat trick to make a creature indestructible and give it +1 power. And then this thing sticks around, and you can move it for 1 colorless mana to give a +1 power boost. You know, it's not the biggest board impact in the world, but the equip cost is so cheap that it's very handy. You know, you can slap all your equipment onto an attacking creature, post-combat, move all of it over to a defending creature. When equip costs are cheap, equipment turns quite powerful, becomes quite powerful. So, overall, I like this. I certainly like it better than, you know, a normal combat trick, because it sticks around with a permanent boost. Collective Nightmare. This is an uncommon, black and 2 colorless instant. It has Convoke, so it could potentially cost 0. Target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn. This is just kind of a good bread and butter removal spell in black. -3/-3 is not going to be big enough to deal with some of the game-ending threats. It is big enough to affect combat nicely, so you can use it as a combat trick, right, to debuff something of the opponents. And there's also just a lot of creatures that this will end up killing. It can cost less than 3 mana, which probably puts it above rate most of the time. You know, sometimes you'll cast this for 3 and it'll be fine. So yeah, this is a good one to be aware of, that this exists in the format, and that even if your opponent is tapped out, if they've got a black creature, they could be representing Collective Nightmare. Alright, Completed Huntmaster. This is black and 2 colorless, uncommon. It's a 2/3 Phyrexian Elf Warrior. Pay 1 and tap, sacrifice another creature or artifact to incubate 3. So, this is a powerful outlet in Limited for like an Aristocrat's sacrifice type of build. So, if you have things that you don't mind sacrificing, creatures and artifacts in particular, then this can start churning out 3/3s. The 3/3s take 2 mana to activate, but they can play with a +1 counter theme, they can play with a Phyrexian theme, they can play with a Transform theme. There's a lot to like about the Completed Huntmaster. He does this at instant speed. Now, in case you haven't played with a creature like this before that can do this at instant speed, you can sacrifice a chump blocker to incubate 3. right? You can sacrifice anything the opponent points a removal spell at, other than the Huntmaster. So it's sort of like he's protecting your other cards, but instead of keeping them on the battlefield, he's just turning them into 3/3 incubators. And this is incredibly powerful, actually. This might be one of the key uncommons of black. I think that the amount of value that this represents, the opponent just, if they've got removal, they've got to kill this guy. They can't let this guy turn active. Once he turns active, all the combat math, everything starts to turn in your favor. Because anything that was going to die, you might as well get a 3/3 out of it. Yeah, I think this card is fantastic. Consuming Aetherborn. So this is a 2/2 Aetherborn Vampire. It's a common, black and 3 colorless. It has lifelink and it has backup 1. So this creature could be a 3/3 lifelinker. It could also be a 2/2 lifelinker that makes one of your other creatures bigger and gives it lifelink for a turn. It's only till end of turn, so backup's kind of an offensive ability where you really need the thing to get in that turn to profit from the lifelink. I think this card is a little bit underwhelming. I think, passing out a +1 counter and lifelink to a flyer for a turn, that could help you win a damage race if you're in a position like that. I feel like this is going to be a pretty slow format, and leaving behind a 2/2 lifelinker is not great. If you have equipment or other ways to give a permanent boost to this lifelink creature, then you could get the upfront kind of tempo value out of it, and then on the back end, if you can pass the equipment over to him, he'll do some pretty good stuff for you then. Overall, I'm not that impressed though. Alright, Corrupted Conviction, 1 black, instant, common. As an additional cost to cast the spell, sacrifice a creature, draw 2 cards. This is a functional reprint of Village Rites. So if you're going to do an aristocrat-style build, I'm sure this card will find room in your deck. If you have things you don't mind sacrificing, then drawing 2 cards is a nice thing to do with them. Now, if it's in the same deck with completed Huntmaster, a lot of the time you'd probably rather sacrifice things to the Huntmaster. But maybe there's a time where you'd rather draw cards. Maybe there's a turn where you can only use the Huntmaster once per turn and there are 2 things you'd like to sacrifice. I think they can both coexist in the same deck. It's a solid card. There's only, some decks that really want to run it, though. If you're just running a one-of copy of this in a deck to occasionally, sacrifice something the opponent points a removal spell at to get a little value, then I think it's very so-so. Deadly Derision. 2 black, 2 colorless, common, instant. Destroy target creature or planeswalker, create a treasure token. I think this is going to be one of the bread and butter removal spells of the format. Can kill a creature of any size. Could deal with a planeswalker if you need it to. The treasure token will probably find relevance. So 4 mana is more than you want to pay for this effect in Constructed. I feel like this is a slower format, and this is going to be premium removal in this slower format. The treasure token can help smooth out your colors a little bit, right? If you're primarily in black and trying to hit your splashes, this is just a good card, generally speaking. Dreg Recycler. Black and a colorless, 2/2, Phyrexian Beast, it's a common. Tap to sacrifice an artifact or creature. Each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. It's noteworthy that this doesn't require mana. It's just a tap and sack to do this. So if you have an Aristocrats deck, or if you can do a steal and sack deck, where you take something of the opponent's temporarily with a red spell and then sacrifice it. Drag Recycler will go just fine in there. It seems like there's a lot of sacrifice outlets in black, so it's probably one of the big archetypes that we're looking at in black. This one's not amazing, but it can give some late game reach, not the kind that blocks flyers, but the kind that deals the last damage to your opponent when the board is stalled and you can't get in for combat. Can drain the opponent out those last few points that you need. So, it's okay. I don't think it's amazing, but if you're in this style of Aristocrats deck, then I think it'll do work for you. Alright, Etched Familiar. Etched Familiar is a common, a black and 2 colorless, 3/2 artifact creature, Phyrexian Fox. When this dies, each opponent loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life. So, this is a way that you can pressure your opponent's life total in an Aristocrats build. If you're not in an Aristocrats deck, I think this format's going to have trouble for a 3/2 for 3 getting in. I think it'll do better as a blocker than it will as an attacker. It's a reasonable on-rate kind of creature in effect, but if you're not in an Aristocrats deck or an Artifact Synergy deck, something like that, maybe a Phyrexian deck, then I think this card's going to be very mediocre if you're not in the correct archetype. Alright, Etched Host Doombringer. This is a black and 4 colorless, it's a common, 3/5, Phyrexian Demon. When it ETBs, you choose 1. Each opponent, target opponent. Target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Or choose target battle. If an opponent protects it, meaning if that's your battle that you're trying to flip, then it removes 3 defense counters from it. Otherwise, put 3 defense counters on it. This card is neat. It's neat that it messes with battles. There are a lot of battles. And a lot of them crop up at uncommon. Which means you're going to see some number of them. And even if the opponent does not have a battle, and even if you don't have a battle, I think it's better as a proactive card, where if you have battles in your deck, then you get a 3/5 and it takes 3 defense off of a battle that you're trying to flip. I think that's a better use for it. It can be used defensively to make an opponent's battle harder to flip. I think that's the more edge case scenario, but it is an option, which is neat. There's also just drain the opponent for 2, which is totally reasonable on a 3/5 body for 5. It's pressuring their life total some more. Life gain gives you a little bit more buffer, can help in a damage race. I think a 3/5 for 5, this format looks slower, and I think in a slower format, a 3/5 for 5 that has these interesting ETB triggers is going to be one of your better commons, actually. I really like the Etched Host Doombringer here. It's going to be a powerful tool for flipping your battles. It can be a way to get the last points in on the opponent's life. It's going to hold the ground for you. I think that the board stalemate, it's just going to clog up on the ground. And you can just lock that up further with a 3/5 for 5. And he's doing stuff for you in the meantime. He's not just an Iron Root Treefolk. So I think if this card is flipping your battles for you, it's doing its best work, and it's kind of almost crucial in your deck if you have battles to flip over. And if you don't have battles to flip over, I think it's still a very playable card. Can mess with the opponent's battles, flip any battles you do happen to have, drain the opponent for 2. I just like it. I like it. Failed Conversion. This is black and 4 colorless. It's a common. It's an aura enchant creature. The enchant creature gets -4/-4, and when the creature dies, you surveil 2. So the majority of the time, when you stick this on something, it's going to die right away. -4/-4 is a pretty big penalty. So most of the time, this will go right to the graveyard. You'll get your Surveil 2 immediately. And Surveil 2 is pretty powerful. You can leave them on top in any order. You can, seed cards into your graveyard if they're valuable to you. Get lands out of the way in the late game. Surveil's just a really nice ability. And it's tacked on to, not an exciting removal spell, but a playable removal spell. And if the creature wouldn't die immediately, then there's some tricks you can do, right? You could play this post-combat, kill something that's got some damage on it. You could play it on something that's threatening too much damage and you're having trouble blocking, just to shrink it to make the clock much slower. Right? Like there's the 5/6 octopus in blue that could become unblockable. If you just need to save your life, you could failed conversion that octopus, put it down to 1 power, and 1 power is not much of a clock. Gives you time to find other options. So failed conversion is going to see play. I'm not super excited about it, but it is a workable, reasonable chunk of 5 mana removal. It is okay. Alright, Final Flourish. This is a black and a colorless. It's an instant common. Kicker, you can sacrifice an artifact or creature. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. If the spell is kicked, that creature gets -6/-6 until end of turn instead. So, if you're in an Aristocrats style build, once again, we're seeing this theme crop up just over and over again here in black. So it seems like it's really pushing for Aristocrats. You can do it with artifacts as well as creatures. Then -6/-6 at instant speed is going to kill just about anything. Just about anything you point it at. -2/-2 at instant speed for 2 mana is fair. That's fine. Kill a little flyer, kill some annoying utility creature or something like that. But yeah, this spell will do its best work when you pay the kicker cost. Just about any deck can probably afford 1 copy of the Final Flourish, and if you need to kill something bad enough, you'll sacrifice something even if it's awkward. It will do its best work, of course, in a deck that can, do the Aristocrats theme. Overall, I think it's very strong removal. In a lot of decks, a lot of game states, it will probably be better than the failed conversion. Probably some of the premium removal here at 2 mana. I don't know if I like Final Flourish quite as well as Deadly Derision. I think if you're not Aristocrats, Deadly Derision maybe, sometimes a better choice. It's double black pips, though. And it's 4 mana. So yeah, just a good card. Alright, Flitting Gorilla. And this is a gorilla like a gorilla fighter, like strikes from the shadows and retreats back again. Not like a gorilla that pounds its chest and climbs trees. Anyway. Do gorillas climb trees? I'm pretty sure they do. Man, I don't know that much about gorillas. Anyway. Black and 2 colorless. It's a common fairy rogue. It's a 2/2 flyer. When it dies, each player mills 2 cards. There's a symmetry again of both players doing the thing. Then you may exile this card. When you do, Put target creature or battle card from your graveyard on top of your library. So 2/2 flyer for threes, you know, it's about fair, kind of par for the course. I think flyers are going to be more important in this format because the ground is going to lock up. From what I've been seeing in this format, there are so many little token creatures and little incubator tokens and high toughness blockers on the ground. I think having some flyers is going to be crucial. So this card's okay, you know, as a wind drake, but then it can do this mill. Milling the opponent can help some of your cards. There are things that get turned on that we looked at in blue. When an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard. And in this case, you can get back a creature or battle card, but not in your hand. So it's not nearly as good as returning back to your hand to put it on top of your library. The opponent might be able to mill you. And if they don't, then it's still replacing the card you would have drawn for the turn. You don't get an extra card. It still has value, though. You might have something nice in the graveyard that's better than most of the things you could draw. 40% of the cards in your deck are land. So later in the game, it's better to draw something that's not a land. So it's got upside. 2/2 flyers may be reasonably aggressive in the early game. Later, you can kind of grind out some value for you. I think it is okay. Gift of Completion. Black and a colorless. This is an uncommon enchantment. When this ETBs, you incubate 3. Right, so you make an artifact token with 3 counters, can pay 2 to turn it into a critter. And whenever a Phyrexian you control dies, surveil 1. Transformed incubator tokens are Phyrexians. So, this card's kind of pushing for an incubator deck. It's also going to be good in a Phyrexian deck. Wouldn't be the worst in a +1 counter deck. Just in general, I think it's, and you could look at it as like a 3/3 for 4, where you can pay the mana in installments. And when it dies, you surveil 1. Then it has further upside if you have more Phyrexians. Overall, I like it. Turning into a 3/3 is gonna, help solidify your board, help your ground stall situation by making sure you can, match the opponent step for step. And getting incremental value like surveils is going to be useful in the format, I think. Yeah, just overall for its mana cost, I think this is a pretty nice package of stuff that it's giving you. All right, Glistening Deluge. This is 1 black. It's an uncommon sorcery. All creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn. Creatures that are green and or white get an additional -2/-2 until end of turn. I feel like this is a sideboard card. If your opponent is, like say in blue-red, with little elemental tokens, then this will sweep those up nicely. If your opponent is green or white, then this spell has a lot of value for you. I don't know if you just run it blind in best of 1, not knowing if the opponent has any, 1/1 tokens or green or white. It's okay, but it's almost like a coin flip. I don't know if you can main deck this card. I think it's a very good sideboard card, though, if you're drafting best of 3. And all those little incubator tokens are colorless. So just buyer beware. Food for thought. All right, Gloomfang Mauler. This is black, and 5. So 7 mana, common. It's a 5/5 creature, Nightmare. It has Swamp Cycling 2. So you can pay 2, discard it, find a swamp. That can help you hit your land drops. It can also help fix your mana if you didn't have the black in your hand already. It has backup 2 and Menace. So this could be a 7/7 Menace creature, which is a very reasonable deal at 7 mana. But it's got the optionality of being a 5/5 Menace that makes one of your other creatures +2/+2 bigger, and giving it Menace for a turn. And I think a lot of the time that mode's going to be even better. Being able to get in with something that, draws you a card or gains you life, or, maybe just is the damage you need to win the game. That's a pretty decent board impact the turn that this comes down, which it ought to have because it costs 7. The fact that you can Swamp Cycle this early and get such a powerful creature late, I really like this. I like all of these, really. These basic land cyclers. I think they're very good in this set. And I think this set is much slower than Phyrexia All Will Be One. So I think it is not unreasonable that you could get up to the point of playing out these Gloomfang Maulers. You might want to go into black-green if you're going to build a ramp deck. But you can always cycle these early. So I just think it's pretty good. I like them. I like it. Yeah, it. Alright, Ichor Drinker. This is 1 black. That's a common 1/1 creature Phyrexian vampire. It has lifelink. And you can pay a black and exile it from your graveyard to incubate 2. You can only do that as a sorcery. So, a 1/1 lifelinker's, not great in this format, I think, because it's hard to be aggressive, but it's not the worst. If you pile some equipment onto this, then the opponent is kind of obligated to block and trade with it. And then you get more value out of it. I think this is, one of your go-to little 1-drops in an Aristocrats build. Because it gets value out of the graveyard. Turns into an incubator token. You can either, sack that token as an artifact, which there are, ways to get value out of that here in black. Or you can, pay 2, turn it into a 2/2. Just overall, I think Ichor Drinker is going to be very good in the Aristocrats build. It's also a payoff in, all the symmetrical mill that happens in this format. So if you're doing some of that symmetrical milling in your deck, you could, reasonably reliably get some Ichor Drinkers into the graveyard, get value out of them that way. That's pretty nice too. So overall, I think this card's got a role to play. I think if you're not in the mill deck and you're not in Aristocrats, then the Ichor Drinker is a very forgettable chump blocker that also turns into a 2/2 eventually. You'd really rather have the synergies if you're going to play this card. Alright, Ichor Shade. This is a black and 2 colorless. It's a common. It's a 2/3 creature, Phyrexian Shade. At the beginning of your end step, if an artifact or creature was put into a graveyard from the battlefield this turn, so it doesn't trigger on the opponent's turn, just at your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on Ichor Shade. This is probably one of the strongest black commons in the set. Right here. So the very first turn this comes down, if you, attack in combat, trade with something of the opponent's, you got a 3/4 at end of turn. If you have an Aristocrats deck, where you can make things happen where they die on your turn, then this is going to keep growing. A +1 counter every turn. A 2/3 for 3 is not great, but it's not embarrassing. Right? It can already block 2/2s, even before it's gotten its first counter. But it's not impossible it could get its first counter the turn you play it. Right, there's a 2 mana guy who doesn't cost any mana to tap and sacrifice something to drain the opponent one. So you could sack a little, 1/1 or an artifact token, something like that, and Ichor Shade would just turn on immediately, right into a 3/4. The thing that's interesting to me about Ichor Shade is that if you're getting into combat with the opponent, then times where you don't have great trades on blocks suddenly turn into a reasonable line of play because your Ichor Shades are going to grow at end of turn because things died. And this is just something that happens over the course of a game anyway, even if you're not in Aristocrats. I mean, if you're in Aristocrats, you can pump this thing to the moon, right? You can build the deck around it, and it's going to become enormous. Like a must-kill threat. But even if you're not in that deck, this will be like a 2/3 blocker for 3, which is okay, and over the course of the game here and there, incidentally, it'll pick up some counters. The first time it picks up a counter, it goes above rate, turns into a 3/4. First time it picks up its second counter, it goes way above rate, right? A 4/5 that you only paid 3 mana for, that's way above rate. I think this card is enormously powerful. And if you're in black, I think you should seriously consider it. Deck synergy or no synergy. I think it's just good. Not as good if you don't have the synergies, but still very playable. All right, Merciless Repurposing. Or Urabrask. All right, 2 black, 4 colorless. So 6 mana instant, it's an uncommon. Exile target creature, incubate 3. So the question of whether this spell is good or not depends on whether I'm getting the correct read on this format that it's going to be slow. 6 mana removal spells have been playable in limited formats in the past. I can remember some pretty clunky ones, like one that could give you like a 1/1 snake token. That was a 6 mana sorcery. And I know that limited formats have changed over time, but I'm just saying this one is an instant, which already is making it much better than a sorcery would have been at 6. It exiles, so no muss, no fuss. If you can target it, it's gone forever. And incubate 3, you get potentially a 3/3 out of the deal. And even though that's a total investment of 8 mana, it's nothing like trying to pay 8 mana in a single turn. Right? Paying it in installments when you already have 6 mana, 2 mana is nothing, basically, when you're up to 6 mana. So, yeah, you kill something of the opponent's, you get a 3/3 creature. It really depends on if the format's as slow as I think it's going to be. If it is that slow, Merciless Repurposing might be, a really key piece of value removal, in like a grindy, go long into the game kind of value pile type of deck, where you stall out the board, play, removal and card draw, and you're just dealing with everything the opponent's doing, and all your cards are 2-for-1ing them. This is a 2-for-1 right here, just built in. Exile something of the opponent's, put power and toughness on the board. It's like a Necrotol. It's like a creature with an ETB trigger of killing something. In this case, it has flash. And it takes 2 mana to turn it on. I like this spell. I'm hesitant on how highly to choose it. But I think if you play into the setup cards of this format, the things that'll stall out the game and grind it to a halt, I think this card could be amazing. Could be really, really good. I know it looks like garbage because everyone just got off of Phyrexia All Will Be One, where if something costs 6 mana, it better win the game. But I think here this might actually be pretty good. We'll see. We'll see. Right at the moment, I like it. Alright, 1 black, instant, Mirrored and Avenged. Destroy target creature that was dealt damage this turn, draw a card. This is okay, right? In Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, this is a functional reprint of You Are Already Dead. So it's, I think, just word for word functional reprint of it. That card's okay. A lot of the time, you have to, send in a creature to die that, doesn't have the best attacks. Then you use this spell. This spell at least replaces itself. So you kind of don't 2-for-1 yourself, but you kind of do. Let me explain. All right, so cantrips, the thing with cantrips, if you're not getting actual card advantage, if it's just replacing itself with a card, 40% of the cards you draw are land. Which means that the draw a card effect on Mirrored and Avenged is, about 60% of a real spell. So if you throw away a creature, then you impact the board with this card. If it replaces itself with a land, it's playable, but I don't love it. It does play better with red, right? You could do some little red damage effects, ping effects. If you get an effect that incidentally does 1 damage to all the opponent's stuff, then you have some of these cards in your deck, that's pretty cool. But don't value this like it's, a full-on removal spell. It's more like an option of last resort. Not something I would be real happy about playing in my deck. Nizumi Informant, black and a colorless. This is a common. It's a 1/1 rat rogue. When it ETBs, each opponent discards a card. So, we've seen tons of variants on this at this point of a 2-mana 1/1 that makes the opponent discard a card. If you're in the Aristocrats deck, then you can take advantage of this. That's where this card is going to shine. Right? You want fodder to sacrifice. So this coming down, trading with a card from the opponent's hand, which isn't nothing, right? That's 1-for-1 on cards. Then you can sacrifice this for some kind of value, right? Sack it to make a 3/3 incubator token. Sack it to drain the opponent for the last points you need to win the game. Sack it to draw 2 cards, that kind of thing. If you're not in the Aristocrats deck, this is junk. Absolute garbage. You really need to be in Aristocrats. Because otherwise, you're always kind of trading with the worst card the opponent has in their hand, up to the point that the opponent doesn't have any cards in their hand anymore. And then you're playing a 1/1 for 2. In the meantime, the opponent's been keeping all the relevant things, all of the best things to play to fill their curve, to keep drawing them cards, to fight against your discard. And their creatures are going to outsize yours. Almost every incubator token is going to outsize this. There might be a few that are 1/1s, but even then they'll trade with this. So if you're in Aristocrats, this is a playable card. And it'll be pretty good in your Aristocrats deck. You pick up the the engine cards of the deck first. And you pick these up, kind of late. But if you're not in that deck, I wouldn't run it. All right, Phyrexian Gargantua. 4 black. This is a reprint. So it's a 4/4 for 6, uncommon, creature of Phyrexian Horror. When it ETBs, you draw 2 cards and you lose 2 life. So this is a good reprint. 4/4 for 6 that draws you 2 cards. I think this is going to be a slower format, grindier format, which means that the Gargantua is going to be a good card. Again, having just come off of Phyrexia All Will Be One, I think some people are going to be taken off guard that this is going to be a good card. This is the kind of card that would be garbage. Probably not the best. In Phyrexia All Will Be One, there's a real question of if you want to run any 6-drops. And if you do you want to run a 6-drop that makes you lose 2 life? This format, though, looks totally different. And I think the Gargantua is going to be a really good card in this format. So, yeah, I think this is totally playable. Maybe even really good. I love cantrip creatures, and this is actually a card advantage creature. Takes it one step further. All right. Render Inert, black and 2 colorless. It's a sorcery, uncommon. Remove up to 5 counters from target permanent. Draw a card. So this, I think, can flip a battle for you. I would need to check the errata to make absolutely certain of that. But I think this card can flip a battle for you. Kind of like deal 5 damage to a battle. Also pretty good at killing a planeswalker. Also pretty good at killing a large incubator token. Those do exist. There are enchantments that put out like 4/4 and things that put out 5/5 incubator tokens. So if the opponent's got something like that, he'd be pretty happy to render it inert. So, and it replaces itself. I think this card is better if you can use it proactively, right, to flip your own battles. In which case, it's going to be great in your deck. But I think it's going to be playable. Kind of fringe. Maybe a little bit more of a sideboard card, but I think it'll be fringe playable in most decks because there's going to be either incubators or like the green-white archetype has a +1 counter theme. I think there are enough targets for this effect that even if you're not killing a premium thing or if you're just shrinking something without killing it, the fact that it does so and it draws you a card, helps you keep churning through the deck, keeps getting you further into the game and affecting the board state. I think it's great if you have battles. I think it's sort of playable even if you don't. Again, I think we need to check the errata on it, figure out if it helps you flip your own battles. And if it didn't, then it would be good at killing the opponent's battles. But I think it's meant to flip your own battles. All right, Scornblade Berserker, 1 black. It's a 0/1 creature human berserker. It's an uncommon. Man, look at that art. She looks feisty. All right. So back up 1. So could come down as a 1/2 for 1 mana. Has the ability pay 1, sacrifice this creature, draw a card. And since she comes in with backup, she can give this ability to another one of your creatures. it's an interesting tension because that means the creature that you would be sacrificing, maybe you just made it bigger, right? You just put a +1 counter on it, so you just made it more valuable. But maybe there's still a reason you want to sacrifice it anyway. Maybe, I think there's a red creature in this set that deals damage equal to its power when it dies. That would be a good combo. There are some other creatures probably with neat death triggers. There's a blue one that loots you a card or it shuffles things from your graveyard when it dies. Yeah, I think you can find use cases for it. And sometimes you'll be happy enough to play this down, pump another creature, not sacrifice that creature. And now you have this 0/1, which you can either, exchange for a card, or you can sacrifice it to some other effect in your Aristocrats build. You just got a piece of fodder here. It can sacrifice itself, or you can sacrifice it to something else. I think it's really good in the Aristocrats deck. Outside of the Aristocrats deck, I'm not sure if it has enough board impact. I think you really want to be in that archetype if you're going to run this 1-drop. All right, Tenured Oilcaster. This is a black and 3 colorless. It's common. It's a 2/4 Phyrexian wizard. Has menace. Gets +3/+0 as long as an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard, and whenever it attacks or blocks, each player mills a card. Symmetrical. They're doing this symmetrical thing. This set, it's interesting. All right. This card seems very playable to me. Right, if I'm correct about the format being slower, then getting down a 2/4 blocker on turn 4 is going to be a nice solid play. And later in the game, the Oilcaster will pump up to a 5/4 with menace. And even if he's blocking, he mills players' cards. So even using him as a blocker, he's going to get you there. I think this card's all right. Yeah, I think it's decent card in the mill deck strategy. Decent late game threat, decent blocker. Overall, I think you'll be pretty happy to be running this card. It's not like top notch or anything, but it's useful. All right, Traumatic Revelation. Black and a colorless, common sorcery. Target opponent reveals their hand. You may choose a creature or battle card from it. If you do, the player discards that card. If you don't, incubate 3. So, it says may. You're not forced to make the opponent discard. So if you don't see something valuable enough to make them discard, just don't. I know it's always tempting to make the opponent discard if you have the option, but if the cards that are in their hand are low impact, don't bother. Just go for the incubate 3. Then you've effectively got a 3/3 for 4 that you paid in installments. Paying in installments is always easier than paying for upfront. And that is fine. It's not the best, but you had the option when you first cast the spell of taking a creature or battle away from them. And if it was really good, then that would be worth it. That would be better than the 3/3. I think this card is playable. I don't think it's exciting. I think there's a lot of cards you'd play first. But if you're playing an incubator deck, Phyrexian deck, +1 counter deck, something like that, then this is a reasonable discard spell that can always be a 3/3 incubate token. Not bad. Unseal the Necropolis. Black and 2 colorless. It's an instant common. Each player mills 3 cards. It's just all symmetrical. Then you return up to 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. So this is card advantage, but it's scary to do this without a creature in your graveyard. The odds of hitting 2 creature cards on a mill 3 is a bit slim. You know, if your deck is literally just lands and creatures, then you've got decent odds. Decent odds. Right? It's just, you know, 22 creatures, unseal the Necropolis, and 17 lands. You have decent odds of hitting at that point, but not perfect. I think it's much better if you already have a creature or 2 in the graveyard. Then you know you're going to get 1 or 2 hits off of this. You could get lucky and mill something that's better than what you were going to return. So overall, this is a piece of card advantage. It's card draw. Advances the mill strategy. If you want the opponent to have 8 or more cards in their graveyard, then this will help get you there. It's effectively like a draw 2 that you have to kind of jump through a couple of hoops to accomplish. If you run this in Aristocrats, you'll almost certainly have fodder in the graveyard to come back. That's worth noting. You know, if you're in Aristocrats, it's like a draw 2. If you're in a mill deck, it's like a really nice synergy piece that's also a draw 2. If you're not in those decks, it's okay. But I wouldn't, you know, go out of your way for it. All right, Vanquish the Weak. Black and 2 colorless. It's a common instant. Destroy target creature with power 3 or less. This will do good enough work for you most of the time, but I have a warning. I remember playing in formats where, you know, destroy a creature with power 2 or less, power 3 or less were removal spells. They usually find targets, but it's not always the thing that actually needs to die. If this is a grindier, slower format, then Vanquish the Weak... Okay, here's the problem. So it's 3 mana, it's always 3 mana. You can't convoke it. So most of the time, the creature that this kills is going to cost about 3 mana or less. It's hard to get a mana advantage, like a tempo advantage, when you're doing Vanquish the Weak, because most of the things it kills are smaller. And it just doesn't deal with things that are bigger. And if this is a slower format, the things that are bigger are going to be the things that you really need the removal spells for. You know, if the ground is clogged up with 5 blockers over there, killing one of them doesn't change the board state that much. There are valuable things to kill, right? There are, you know, engine cards and lords, and there are things that are at low power that you will be, you know, well advised to kill. But we've already seen other removal spells that would do it, and can hit other things, bigger things, than Vanquish the Weak. So just be forewarned. I played long ago during blocks like Onslaught and such when the card SWAT was legal. SWAT at least had the generosity of having cycling on it. So you could discard SWAT if it wasn't useful. It was power 2 or less, and it cost 3 mana. This is remarkably better than SWAT, because power 3 is a big step up. But not having the cycling, I have a feeling that Vanquish the Weak is going to be one of the crappier pieces of removal in black. we've seen some top-notch removal further up. Things that just deal with any target and give you value, put creatures on the field, put treasure on the battlefield, do -6/-6, kills almost anything. Those, I think, are what you really want. Vanquish the weak. I am giving the stink eye. I think it's playable, but I don't think it's as good as it looks like it might be. So, buyer beware. All right, let's jet on down to the double face cards. All right, Etherblade Agent. So this is a black and a colorless. It's a common. 1/1 human rogue, death touch. So a 1/1 death toucher for 2. This is a reasonable card. It's very good at stalling the ground for you. If you want to attack in, trade it away, you can. As long as the opponent doesn't have first strike, double strike over there, this is either gonna, keep poking their life total, or it's gonna trade away. And it makes, obviously, a fantastic blocker. When you get to 4 or 5 mana, like 4 and a blue Phyrexian mana, you can transform this only as a sorcery. So when you do that, you get a Gitaxian Mindstinger. Yeah, Mindstinger. So this is a Phyrexian Rogue. It's a blue-black 3/3. Still has Death Touch. And when it deals combat damage to a player or battle, you draw a card. Now, I'm not sure how likely it is that you can actually get in to deal this combat damage, even with a 3/3 Death Toucher. Well, I think what's much more likely to happen is that you force your opponent into some blocks they didn't want to make. And maybe at that point, if you've got a combat trick or some removal, maybe you can blow out a double block nicely. Or just keep this alive. Kill one of their creatures, keep going the next turn. It's hard to say how good this ability is going to be. There's a blue flyer that has this card draw ability, and I think flying is much more likely to get you through. I think with the Death Touch, an opponent who knows what they're doing and knows that you drawing cards is bad is going to put something in front of this. I still think this card's okay because the front face of it is just reasonable. 1/1 Death Toucher for 2 is a very threatening blocker, and not the worst attacker either. So it's already playable. So why not? Maybe you can put them in a tough spot when you flip it over. And we're going to keep looking at the uncommons and commons. Blight Reaper Thallid. So black and a colorless. This is an uncommon 2/2 fungus. And for 3 and a Phyrexian green, you can transform it only as a sorcery. So this is one where you can play it on turn 2 and actually flip it on turn 3 if you're so inclined. 2/2 for 2 is very forgettable in this format. Could be useful for convoking. When it flips over, you get Blight Sower Thallid. It's a 3/3. Green-black. When it transforms into this or dies, you get a 1/1 Phyrexian Saproling creature token. It's green. So ultimately it'll give you 5 total power and toughness. Right, you get a 1/1 when it transforms in, you get another 1/1 when it dies. And 5 total power and toughness is pretty good for the upfront of what you've put into it. And you got a 2/2 along the way when you first played it. I think this is okay. I think it will do well. Since it's got green in its activation, which you can pay life for. Maybe the green-black deck would do well with this card. What I'm seeing is Aristocrats is going to do well with this card. Maybe green-black is a good Aristocrats color. But yeah, it gives token fodder, and then you don't always necessarily want to sack a 3/3, but if you do, then it gives you yet more sacrifice fodder when it dies. So yeah, this feels very much on theme for Aristocrats, and I think it would do okay even in a value pile deck. I think the value proposition of flipping it over is about good enough that it's playable even off archetype. I think it's okay. All right, Invasion of Eldraine. I'll read this so you don't have to crane your neck here. Black and 3 colorless. It is an uncommon. It's a battle. It has 4 defense. When this ETBs, target opponent discards 2 cards. So unfortunately, this is a battle that doesn't help you flip it over. If you make the opponent discard 2 and they actually have 2 cards to discard, then you got card advantage. So that's nice, but it hasn't made it any easier to attack in and flip this over. But if you manage to do it, then you get Prickle Fairies. It's a 2/2 black fairy, has flying. Beginning of each opponent's upkeep, if that player has 2 or fewer cards in hand, Prickle Fairies deals 2 damage to them. So this is kind of a discard payoff effect. You did have to attack in for 4 damage that wasn't at your opponent's face in order to get the Prickle Fairies. The thing I like about this, even though it doesn't help you flip it over, is if you play it earlier in the game and you don't flip it right away and you kind of let it sit for a while, over the course of a long game, the opponent is likely to play all the cards out of their hand eventually. Which means if you get to this later in the game and flip it over, they might have just naturally gotten down to having 2 or fewer cards in hand. And this will start, shocking them on their upkeep. And a 2/2 flyer could be useful. It's obviously not amazing or anything, but the board is going to be really stalled on the ground, and a flyer is more likely to be able to connect, from what I've seen. So I don't think this battle is the worst. I don't think it's unplayable. I think it's got a sneaky way to win the game later in the game, right? You've had this battle on the board for a really long time. The opponent's almost kind of written it off. And then suddenly, one day, you play a removal spell, attack in, flip this over, and they start taking 2 damage every turn, and they're down to 8 life or something. And that's when the opponent's like, oh. I don't think this is unplayable, but I'm also not super excited. It's okay. Alright. Invasion of Olgrotha. Black and 4 colorless. This is a battle. It's an uncommon. It has 5 defense. When Invasion of Olgrotha ETBs, it deals 3 damage to any other target, and you gain 3 life. Okay, so any other target in this case means it could shoot down a creature, right? That's the most obvious one. It could shoot down another battle and flip it over for you. That's cool. It can also, shoot down a planeswalker, take some loyalty off of it. That won't come up very much, but it might. And it could also drain the opponent out when they're at 3 or less life and just win you the game. So I know that 5 mana looks like a lot to pay for a removal spell. But it's a removal spell that could also burn the opponent's face, kill a planeswalker, or flip a battle for you. And you gain 3 life when you're doing this. And for that reason, I think this is actually a pretty playable piece of sorcery speed removal. It has added upside if you attack it down, and clearing a blocker out of the way does help you attack it down, right? You can impact the board, actually shoot something out of the way, which could help you attack this down. So, when it flips over, you get Grandmother Ravi Singir. I was just reviewing the old version of this card just a few days ago in my Homelands limited black walkthrough. Anyway, and appropriately, she's a 3/3 for 5. So, she's a 3/3 legendary creature, human wizard, black, has flying. Human? Should she maybe be like an avatar or a zombie? Okay, I won't get into it. Anyway. So 3/3 flyer is already pretty decent. When a creature an opponent controls dies, put a +1/+1 counter on her and you gain 1 life. That's really cool. So if her ability triggers even once, turning into a 4/4 flyer starts outsizing a lot of the other stuff in the format. And she has the potential to keep growing. Right? Could just keep growing turn after turn after turn. And she's not limited to once per turn on this trigger. All right, if you finagle some way or get into a big combat where 3 of the creatures your opponent's control dies, she's going to be a 6/6. You're going to gain 3 life. So I know this card's probably not good enough for Constructed, but I think in Limited, it's better than it looks. Don't underestimate Homelands, my friends. Alright, Nezumi Freewheeler. Ulgrotha, by the way, is the name of the plane that Homelands is set upon. That's where it happens. Nezumi Freewheeler, black and 3 colorless. This is an uncommon 3/3 Rat Samurai. It has Menace. When it enters the battlefield, each player mills 3 cards. So, if you're doing the mill strategy, either for yourself, or for the opponent, or both, 3/3 Menace for 4. It's a pretty good body to put on the battlefield. And then you can pay 5 colorless and a white Phyrexian to transform this only as a sorcery. Theoretically, you could do this the next turn, right? You could play this as a 4-drop, play a land, pay 2 life, and flip this thing. That could happen. Turns into a hideous Flesh Wheeler. It's a 4/5 white-black Phyrexian rat. Still has Menace. When it transforms into this, put target permanent card with mana value 2 or less from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So mana value 2 or less means you're not going to get something super impactful, but it says a graveyard. A graveyard, not your graveyard. And you just milled the opponent. So there's every possibility that you can get a 2-drop or a 1-drop of the opponent's, as well as one of yours. Well, you know, instead of one of yours. It only happens the one time, but a 4/5 Menace is a big body on the battlefield, pretty hard to block. So, you know, nice chunk of creature, and you get a 2-drop either from your graveyard or the opponent's. It doesn't have to be a creature either, it's just a permanent. So, it could be an artifact, could be an enchantment, could be a little tiny battle. Most likely a creature. Yeah, so I think since this card's pretty good on the front face, and really quite powerful on the back face, I think this is a great uncommon in black. It's going to do good work for you. Alright, that brings us to the end of this limited guide for black of commons and uncommons. Join me next time. We'll go over red, and then green, and then colorless and multicolored. So until then, stay cool.